Let's get started, guys. It's so great to see everyone. I wish we were in person, but this is the next best thing. If I haven't met you before, I'm Lynda Gargan. I'm the executive director for the Federation, and it's just so good to have so many of you here. We have over 400 people joining us today. And I think we are going to make this worth your time. We are so excited about what we're doing here. I've got a few remarks I want to make to get started, and then we will jump right into the plenary session with Susan. So, I have a question for you as we start. First of all, I'm going to just do a couple of shout outs to all the people who made this session possible. And
Hear a thing.
this is not going to go, there
You
we go.
do?
That's still not slide
Yeah,
mode, but
let's check.
we'll go with that. So this is our 36th conference. We're doing it across a 3-day session, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, to give you some time in the middle to do other things. Um, and we welcome you for being with us. If you aren't sure about who we support families across the lifespan of their children. Um, any children who are experiencing mental health and or substance use challenges, we support their families and support them through their families. We have a network of affiliates and partners across the country, and we connect these families to them through family peer support. All of our support is rooted in lived experience. Our entire team brings a unique lived experience to their work, and it really makes a difference for our families. Now this is very important, and I'm going to read it to you just because of that. At the National Federation of Families, we believe that we must rediscover our capacity for lifting up all members of our society, no matter their lived experiences, challenges, or personal traumas, by focusing on people's potential rather than their differences. We can begin to build stronger and more inclusive neighborhoods. And this is our mission statement that we live by. So if you are not familiar with the work of the Federation, you can see here the variety of services and supports that we offer. Please jump on our website when you have a minute and get to know more about us, and let us know if we can help. Our sponsors this year are amazing, and I want to thank each and every one of them for helping us to bring this event to you. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to do it. And here's our team. Gail, Dana, Kelsey, and Angela are an amazing part of what we do. We are a small team, but we are mighty. And we manage to produce an amazing number of events and resources that are tailored for our families, our young people, and the workforce that supports them. Our board of directors, as you can see, they come from across the country. Amazing people. They are so supportive, and just a shout out to them. So I had to take a personal moment. On October 2nd, I became a grandmother for the second time. This is little Cooper James who has joined us. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because I've kept several of you updated on our kids and our family and how they're doing. And Cooper just joined his little 2-year-old sister, Audrey. But more important, look at this baby's face for just a minute. So Cooper and his baby sister, Audrey, represent our future. And I really try to center my thinking on him and on her, because these are very innocent children, just like all of our children. And we want them to grow up healthy and happy. So let's try to center a lot of our thinking for the next 3 days about the future and how exciting we want the future to be for them. So I'm going to ask you to do something now. If you can see this, I hope you can see this slide. First of all, I want to recognize our amazing Technical Assistance Center that sunsetted the end of September. As you know, Gil was our project director for that center for its entirety. The work we did was phenomenal. We were able to produce the kinds of work that much, much larger technical assistance centers were doing. Now, we will be continuing this work. We will just be continuing it without the SAMHSA funding, but the Federation will continue this work as we move forward. But what I want to ask you to do is think for a minute and think about the urgency of now. I want you to put in the chat, what is keeping you up at night right now? Just one thing. Because I know we could all make a list, but what is keeping you up at night? And then a focus on the future. What gives you hope? What is giving you hope at this moment? So I'm going to end the slideshow. I've lost my stop share. No idea what's going on with this. Let's see. Kelsey, can you end the slideshow, please? Are you able to do that? Because I seem to have lost my stop share.
I think I can, Lynda. Give me just a second.
Thank you, dear. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much. All right, so 2 questions. First, what keeps you up at night? Right now, as you're thinking, what is keeping you up at night? Look at all of these different things. Our jobs, SNAP benefits, your daughter's needs, funding cuts are something. Work, funding, behavioral health taking a back seat to SNAP crisis. That is a very interesting one. That is a very interesting one. Immigrant families. Look at all the things that are keeping us up. So I'm going to say for a minute, I'm going to tell you what's keeping me up at night. And I'm going to broad picture this for you because there are so many things that are keeping us up at night. Mine is more global. I am very, very nervous about this administration's focus on institutionalizing people who they feel don't fit well in the community. People who are homeless, people who are experiencing mental health challenges, substance use challenges, foster kids who don't have a place to go. The answer right now seems to be, let's play the short game and just put them all away. You will hear us focusing this year on this. We are going to center our work around how do we keep people out of institutional settings? What do we need to do to make that happen? And I'm going to ask you to please, please join us with that. Please keep this top of mind and join us as we will be doing webinars and a variety of things. And it will all be centered on keeping people in their communities. And then we will be keeping you up on what's happening in some states. There are states that are buying into this idea of mass incarceration in a very significant way. So we will be keeping you up to date on what's happening across the country, so you will know and you will be aware of what we see happening. So now let's flip that. What gives you hope? Please put that in the chat because we can't stop without knowing what gives us hope. There has to be something. What gives you hope? What makes you think, yeah, we can do this? Faith, yes, faith. Seeing people using their voice, yes. Dedication and commitment. Boy, we are all relying on our faith, and that's wonderful. Some days that's all we have, isn't it? The community, yes. Setting goals, that's great. Yes, we should be setting goals. Let's not lose our focus in the midst of the chaos. Increased advocacy. Support systems. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. One person at a time, we can hold a space for them. Yes, and find solutions. Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for participating in this. Now, let me say this to you. I have got someone here who wants to talk to you, who is going to talk a lot about what's keeping her up at night and what's keeping her going. Susan Nyamora is someone that I've known for several years. She is, other than just being unbelievably delightful, she may be the most powerful advocate I know. She is going to share her story with you. And I'm going to ask you to just sit back and relax and absorb everything Susan has to say. And then when she is finished, we're going to do a Q&A. So if you have questions or comments while she's talking, please, please put them in the chat because we want to keep a record of those. And Susan will talk about those at the end. Susan, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lynda. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you to you and your team for just all of the support, first of all. And then, of course, all of you all who are here with us today online, zooming in. Thank you for being here. I know that it's hard for many of us not being able to connect, but pivoting and doing the best that we can to stay connected with one another, I think is so, so very important. And I just want to, really just kind of emphasize and highlight the fact, Lynda, thank you so much for just the kind words that you have. But although I'm sitting here before you and I am putting my thoughts together with what it is that I want to bring and what it is that I want to share with all of you, I don't want to profess to have everything all together, because I'm a human being just like all of you all, and we're navigating this space together. But I want to really emphasize, and I'm going to share some of my experience with you that demonstrates that although I may have walked through the fire, I have found some freedom on the other side. Does it mean that I have total and absolute freedom to do whatever it is, wherever it is, or however it is that I want to? Um, I do, but that's through a collective body of amazing individuals, just like all of you. And
Susan,
so yes,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're
that's
having
okay.
people ask for you to speak a little louder, and the closed caption, because you're so soft, the closed caption is not working.
Okay, can you hear me a little better now? Is that
Much,
okay?
much
Maybe
better.
maybe I just need to come a little bit more forward, because I'm kind of speaking at the same tone. But yes, if that happens again, let me know because I have a tendency to do this. And I'm just going to be really kind of honest with you because as I start sharing my journey with all of you all, you will also know that I was that child that later became an adult, that became a parent, that is now a grandparent. And so, as Lynda had stated, families across the lifespan, I'm going to kind of take a dive into what that's kind of looked like throughout my journey of life. And so, as I'm going through this process, I want you to think about, do you have a loved one or are you a loved one that has been hurting? Someone that may be supporting someone that is still hurting, and somebody that is looking at how do we deal with this situation called life. Well, I'm going to share a little bit of my personal journey with you. And my personal journey started when I was very young. And so you're probably going to hear a lot of ACE, the adverse childhood experiences, because unfortunately, my life was not always polished and shiny and advocacy driven. It was filled with a life of blended families, disruption, poverty, gang violence, a lot of unfortunate circumstances that I got to witness and be a part of at a very young age. Now, although I'm not going to get into the doom and gloom of those things because I don't think it's necessary to riddle people with traumatic experiences, just to know that they exist, and we do get to the other side, and we do heal, and we do recover, and there are multiple pathways to be able to find that. And you'll hear the varying pathways of my journey throughout my journey of life. So at a very young age, I was born to a mother that struggled with a lot of alcoholism and a lot of untreated mental health challenges. And I began a journey of resiliency very early on because I had to find ways to cope. And through coping, I found a hole in an addict. And a hole where I could go in and read and do all of those wonderful, amazing things. And I learned to find my refuge in a place of and a time that was very challenging because my older siblings were here, there, and everywhere, and were caught up in the midst of incarceration and mental health units. And so it was a very challenging time for me um, because I was navigating food insecurities, housing insecurities, all kinds of different things at a young age. But I learned to create a space that was what I found comfort in the midst of all things. And my mom, I know now, did the best she could with what she had. And I'm super grateful that I was able to heal and find that peace with her. But more importantly, I had a community around me of other children that were also experiencing the same things because we were in a neighborhood filled with poverty and a lot of racism. I'm Hispanic, and the Mexican community in California was very marginalized and oppressed way back then. And oftentimes we were called names and were not given the same opportunities. So we had to navigate a lot of big experiences. And I did that for a really long time until I started experimenting with different drugs and different types of behaviors. And I ended up finding myself in a Baker Act unit at the age of 13 because I attempted to take my life because of unresolved trauma that I had with everything that was taking place in my life. And so before the age of 16, I had 3 attempts at my life because I just really didn't want to do it anymore. I really didn't want to exist. I didn't want to have to navigate these things, and it was really hard. And a lot of people didn't understand me, and most specifically my family. And they didn't understand me because of the fact that in the Hispanic community, we really don't talk about those things outside of the home. So it was really like, my daughter's going to be okay. I don't know what's going on with her. And we're going to take these medication and we're going to deal with these things on our own. And so we took the medication and we dealt with them. And I saw a psychiatrist for a certain period of time until it was no longer necessary, or at least what my family thought was necessary, because my mom was raising all 6 of us. There were 6 children in the household, and my older siblings were getting in all kinds of trouble, and my mother was navigating the juvenile justice system, the welfare system. And back in the 70s, they used to come out to your house and they used to give you paper coupons for SNAP benefits. And they would inspect that everything was going okay, but everything had to be quiet and very hush hushed. And it was a very, very difficult time back then, and I didn't know what was going to happen. So I started venturing into relationships and started getting involved with boys and doing other things and probably wreaking havoc in my mom's life, because that's what we do as teenagers, because we're trying to cope and really just trying to figure out who we are. And it wasn't until I became a teen pregnant mom and ended up in another relationship. So it perpetuates. So if you see how it happens across the lifespan of really looking at what our children are actually experiencing, this has been going on for a really long time, right? Because I referenced the 70s, which means I was born in the 60s. And so having these experiences, we've gotten better with how we handle things, but the children are still facing very similar things. And a lot of times it's poverty, it's oppression, it's racism, it's lack of resources, and we're getting ready to go through that again, right? And so when I think about myself as a teenager and really struggling to fit in and what that looked like, I ended up doing a major geographical change and moving from my mother's house in California to moving to Indiana, a very rural community, which was very different because there were not a lot of people who looked like me or who spoke like me or who understood what I was going through. So I had to go through another form of change, and then I started dibbling and dabbling under more things and getting myself caught up in different types of experiences and circumstances. And it was really hard and overwhelming. And I found that I didn't feel loved, and I started experimenting with heavier drugs and doing other things. And it wasn't until I was 15 years old and I decided that I was going to steal from my grandmother and make my way back to California on a plane without knowing how I was going to get there. It just so happened that my mother's friend happened to be on the same plane and was able to take me to my mother when I got to the other side. And my life kind of continued on, and it just continued on until I ended up in more institutions now as an adult. And it wasn't until that point in my life where I was able to say that I was going to have more children and continue to keep seeking that love that I was trying to identify with at a very young age, because it was like my life perpetuated from a very young age, and I was really seeking love, right? I was looking for love in all the wrong places, and it happened to be with different people and different experiences. Needless to say, my brother was killed in a home invasion robbery in my mother's home, and my mother passed shortly thereafter, and that's when I kind of picked up and walked out of my life. And what I mean by that is that's when I had 4 children at that point. I was in my third marriage, and I walked out of my children's life, and I took to the streets, and I was using substances beyond what it could actually be. I was dealing drugs. As I joke about it now, it's not really a joke, but I said I was in pharmaceutical sales, because when I start talking about my recovery journey, you'll learn how people have to reinvent themselves in order to still fit into society. And so I was running rampant in the streets of Miami-Dade and Broward County, and I was using to die and living to use, which meant every single day I got up, I just wanted to die. But every single day I got up to use in order to die. And I was playing Russian roulette with my life. And it was really hard and it was really heavy, because my children that I love and care for dearly were not enough to keep me well. And so I had this pervasive mental health condition that I call a mood disorder. Many people know as bipolar disorder. And I was self-medicating myself pretty much to death, because I did not know how, nor did the system know how to help me navigate these experiences that I was having without institutionalizing me or having me in some type of restraint, because I was what they considered to be a non-compliant, manipulative individual who was just dope fiending. And it took a really long time, and it took me losing my children and looking at a pretty heavy prison sentence um, in order to get some actual help that I actually needed. And it wasn't until 2006 when I was pregnant with my fifth child and I ended up back in front of my judge in Broward County. And he said, "What are we going to do with you? It looks like we're going to have to send you to prison in order for you to really understand that you cannot continue to keep doing these things." And it wasn't that I wanted to keep doing these things, it's just I didn't see a way out of these things. It was because I didn't have an option to really look at how was I going to pick up the pieces of my life and the amount of trauma and the amount of hurt and the amount of experiences that I had and take care of these children and be a productive member of society. So when I was given the opportunity, what I knew then as a get out of jail free card, it was really an opportunity that was going to change and rock my world. I just had no idea what I was getting into. And it was an opportunity that I had to go into treatment as I was 4.5 weeks pregnant in jail. By the time I got into detox and was able to get some help and really get the opportunity to get my daughter some health care, I was able to then get court ordered to 18 months of more treatment, which in turn was not really what I wanted because I still came in kicking and screaming. Because, substance use doesn't just go away, neither does my mental health subside itself because I've been given a roof over my head and some food in my stomach and an opportunity. I had a lot of work to do, and I had a lot of healing to do. And I had a lot of people that I needed to invite back into my life and a lot of amends that I needed to make. But before I could do any of that, I really needed the healthcare providers to really listen and to really care for me the way I needed to be cared for because I had a lot of complex issues. And when I came in, I was about 38 years old and I was kicking and screaming and I knew everything that there was to know about everything that there was to know. But what I really didn't know is that I was really a young child that was hurting from years and years of generational trauma and abuse and violence that had taken place in my life. And I had not been given the care and the love that I needed. And it wasn't until somebody said, "Have you ever thought about talking to somebody about the traumatic experiences?" And I felt shameful and I felt like I had no right to talk about the things that my mom didn't do for me because she was no longer here. And I felt guilty for that, but it really wasn't about shaming her. It was about reclaiming my healing and recognizing that, and I didn't realize I was going to get emotional on this, recognizing that she did the best that she could and I did the best that I could. And finding that ultimate healing for myself, but also recognizing that forgiveness is also a part of that healing. And even forgiving myself as a mom, taking my children through some of the challenges that they went through, and recognizing that I was able to find that healing and help and support, and kind of reclaim myself. So I was fortunate enough that I did give birth to an amazing young girl that is a college student now, but I was also able to reunify with all of my children in 2007 and be able to start our healing journey together. And it was hard. I'm not going to say it was easy. It was definitely hard because now I have many more diagnoses that I was brought to the forefront of my mind and recognized that I needed to do some work, not only just healing my traumatic experiences, but I also needed to stabilize my mental and emotional well-being. I had a chronic mood condition that was pervasive that would tip off the cart and would cause me to rapid cycle and really take charge of my life in a very chaotic way. And I was able to do this through healthcare professionals that really understood me and really listened to me and listened to the fact that I needed a little bit of every pathway. I needed medication assisted treatment for my mental health and substance use. I needed holistic health care for my endocrine and my autoimmune conditions. I needed trauma healing. I needed my faith because I wanted to reconcile with my spiritual being and wanted to be able to have God in my life. And I needed people in the fellowship that were going to call me out on my stuff when I was not doing what I needed to do. And so I needed a whole lot of my community. And I needed to create that community because people felt like we only had to do things one way. And I needed a multifaceted approach for me. But not only for me, but for my children and for my family to be able to heal. And Nikki, you made me emotional because you showed up on the screen. So my daughter is one of our our youth that work for us, and I just saw her pop up on the screen, so that makes me emotional because we have our own story to tell, and that's been hard because unfortunately I walked out of my daughter's life when she was little, and I left her with her dad for her dad to care for her. So our healing journey has really brought us back together. But it's really helped us define what we want in our future. And it's helped her to become the mom that she is to be. And she has her own story to tell, so I won't share that. But we have navigated that journey together. And I've been very grateful because of the fact that I've been able to heal through my journey of recovery. But not only have I been able to heal, I've been able to restore my family. And I've been able to listen to them because I created a lot of areas in their life that caused them a lot of disruptions. And I'm grateful because they still love me today. And we can talk about those things today. And they know that I honestly did the best that I could. And I'm still continuing to do the best that I can for them. And we're able to have bigger conversations. And I'm able to navigate with my children today and listen to them and what their mental health needs are. And I'll never forget the time that my daughter told me why she needed to move back home. And it was because I understand mental health today and because I listened to them. And, we have navigated this journey together, and, it's been very challenging. I do have a son that actively hears and sees things, and that has been a challenge for us as a family together. But fortunately, we've been able to navigate that, and it's not been easy. And, some of the other children have had to navigate those experiences alongside of me, and knowing that we have a crisis plan for when things kind of go sideways, and understanding when we call crisis intervention and when we rise together as a family. But we've learned to talk about those things, and we've learned to support each other through those things because they're really hard and they're really, really challenging when you have your children who love you, but who are also navigating through difficult things. And that has been a really, really hard journey for me because of the fact that you always want to question yourself, but I also know that I have reinvented myself to a point where my children tell me when I have done things that may have disrupted them in their life, and we make it our business to heal together. We still have a lot of healing to do together, and I recognize that my girls are more willing to heal together than my boys are. Um, my boys have it a lot more difficult, and the girls wish that they would catch up sometimes. But we all have our journey and our own process, and we're still navigating through that process together. And one of the things that I can say is that through my recovery journey, I have made it my business to go back to school and educate myself. I thought I was going to go in and become this life-saving therapist because I had some amazing care providers in my life. Um, God had another plan for me. I did go on and I finished my degree in social work, and I have a master's degree in social work. I did not get licensed because I did not want to be a part of the forced treatment world. And in my state, Baker Acts are a deal. And if you're licensed, it puts you in this very strange position. And God had another plan, and He said, "You're going to create this organization that's going to be people in recovery, families in recovery, really nothing about us without us." And I started this journey of South Florida Wellness Network over 11 years ago when I was given an opportunity to co-found and start what is now known to be the largest peer-run organization in the state of Florida. We have about 87 employees across the lifespan, including youth, families, and adults that provide amazing supportive services to individuals in the community. But it didn't start off that easy. It started off really, really hard, and I started off with a very small grant of $125,000 and to hire a couple of other people and for us to create what we needed in Broward, and that was to expand and elevate the voices of people with lived experience. And so, aside from my testimony that has definitely been God given, because I always say that I have definitely been redeemed from the miry pit, and it was really recognizing that I have touched almost every service setting that there is in life, from youth Baker Acts, youth detention centers, adult Baker Acts, adult CSUs, adult incarceration systems, child welfare, and also treatment. And so I have this plethora of lived and living experience myself as an individual in recovery, but also as a family member in recovery, and still navigating and challenging the narratives of these systems. And I say challenging the narratives because I do believe that professionals are doing the best that they can with what they have available to them, as I think we all are doing the best that we can. However, I think when we all sit at the table, this is when we get to roll up our sleeves and say, I'm wondering what would happen if this. I'm wondering if we ever thought about this. Or I'm wondering what it would look like if we asked them this. And being able to just pose questions that raise curiosity, because I think all in all of us that are working in these systems are recognizing that we need each other. We need partnerships. We need to dismantle systems that were structured this way. Not broken systems, but systems that were put in place specifically to keep oppression at the forefront. And sometimes I don't think that we realize that they were built and created that way, but I think we're becoming more aware as we're seeing where we're at today and what we want our future to look like. And although this is a very, very difficult and challenging times, I'm going to shift a little bit because I'm going to start talking about systems, because my story is my story, and now you're going to know my why. Because there's a lot of hurt and there's a lot of healing in my story, and even though I shed tears, I don't feel like I'm stuck in the illness. I feel that my tears are symbolisms of my growth and rebirth and my shedding and my constant opportunity to heal and grow with my family. And I am a big believer of faith, and so I think that there's always layers that we get to shed. But more importantly, I think there's also opportunity. And, yesterday when I was sitting in church and I was listening to the message, and they said, if you're living amongst the chaos, look up. And I was like, what a powerful message, considering that we're all talking about TANF benefits. And for those of us that live in South Florida and have our Caribbean family that is so near and dear to us in Jamaica and everything that's going on, and we have a lot of families that we serve, we sit there and we say, look up, right? Because we really want to see where it is that we need to pivot, where it is that we need to be creative. And this is a beauty, I think, behind recovery supports, and why I've always said, and all respect to all of us licensed individuals who are doing clinical supports, and for those of you that are doing recovery supports, and this is why we talk about documentation and fitting ourselves in a box, right? And really trying to stay out of that realm, because our clinical partners already are stuck with the criteria-based admissions and all of those things. where recovery supports is very gray, right? It's very gray because we should not be asking for clinical impressions because that's not our job. It's out of our scope of practice. So when we stay within our scope of practices, it makes our services very broad because then we don't have to ask a lot of questions and document those things because it's not our scope of work. And I always say, man, I always knew that God knew exactly what he was doing when he put me in recovery support services because my mission statement is written so broad that I could pretty much help anybody. It doesn't matter whether they have a diagnosis or not because I'm not clinical. I don't have to capture that data. I just want to be able to serve. And I come from a place of servant leadership because there are people that may need a clinical impression, and then there's those that may be untreated, right? And so, really looking at the fact is how do we help others? How do we collectively come together to make sure that we are able to pivot our services in the current climate, in the current administration, when they say, undocumented, documented, and all of these things, and can you help people, and can you do this? When you are not putting yourself into a box that says, we got to do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and this for criteria, it helps you to be able to broaden the services that you provide and also help more people. And that's what we've learned to do at South Florida Wellness Network, because we're not going to do that because it's not our scope of work. We respect our clinical workers. We respect our physical primary healthcare doctors. We respect our teachers. We respect all of those. Those are their roles. These are our roles. And that's where we're able to bridge the gap in the services that we're able to provide because we stay in our lane. And when we stay in our lane, that means that we're providing the ancillary services that maybe our clinical co-partners or our primary healthcare co-partners aren't able to do because of whatever law or whatever legislation or whatever policy is stating that this is their role. Our role is written very broad, and it's like that all the way down from the federal government. The only time it changes is when it hits our community and we sit at a table and we feel like we have to change in order to get funded. We do not have to change to get funded. There is no reason to change the things regarding recovery supports. If we adhere to best practices, then it makes it so much easier to keep our funding intact and be able to have a broad stroke in the work that we do. And that's why we continue to grow and grow and grow. Last year, we did get hit with funding restrictions for one of our care response teams, but this year we did not as of yet. It means that sometimes we have to pivot in how we do business in order to collaborate, in order to help support the other organizations that need these services. And this is what we've learned to do at South Florida Wellness Network. So when we started, I started with myself. A couple months later, I added a family program coordinator. I added a youth coordinator. And so the three of us started building together, and then our funder put in a grant for youth services, and we started doing youth services. When we started doing youth services, we started with the school system and changing the way that they were doing things within the school systems and the prison to the pipeline, the schoolyard to the prison pipeline. And then we started looking at transportation for youth that were being Baker Acted. So now we have a transportation plan in place, and then we expanded into our adult services. So South Florida Wellness Network was actually founded on youth and family services, where a lot of times people think that South Florida Wellness Network is primarily for adults and substance use. We founded in system transformation specifically for youth and families because we were having so many youth that were being Baker Acted or incarcerated. And when we started doing the data dive, we found that Black and brown youth were going to juvenile justice and white youth were going to treatment. And that's how we started building our advocacy efforts specifically for youth and families until we transformed how they do business with our young people, which is amazing because our youth programming at South Florida Wellness Network is one of the largest, where we have our TIP wellness coaches, our youth peer specialist, our juvenile justice youth peers, and then all of our advocacy teams under our youth outreach center, our youth outreach coordinator, excuse me. We do have a lot of adult youth, but they're divided into multiple areas. So we're one organization. We have 4 recovery centers and actually a 5th one, but that one's not fully launched because it's in the metaverse, which means we do have an opportunity to build an RCO for young people that are really into gaming, because we do own property in the metaverse. But our programs are very large and very busy. We are currently serving about a little under 800 people in direct client-specific services, which means one-on-one support, and that is across youth, adults, families, and child welfare. We are very, very busy, unfortunately, in the child welfare arena. We started originally with parents that were misusing opiates, and now we have a very large percentage of parents that are youth aging out of foster care, and also parents with mental health challenges. And this is where we start talking about the families across the lifespan, right? Because as I shared with you all in my story, I was a young child when I started experiencing and experimenting, and then I became a teen mom, and then I became a mom with mental health challenges and substance use challenges, and now I'm navigating my own children's mental health challenges, but doing it a little bit differently because I've taken a proactive role in defining what recovery looks like for me. So recognizing the importance of prevention and early intervention, and I cannot express what that means. And I say that respectfully, and I'm not saying that every parent has a diagnosis like me or has challenges. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that sometimes there's untreated mental health challenges that go on in a family system, and if we are left untreated, the chances of us detecting them on our young people makes it a little bit more challenging, right? Because nobody ever wants to say that, you know, my child has these challenges or my child does this, because for a really long time my children were my worth. So you get together, and I don't know if any of you have got together, but you get around people and you're at a soccer field, and my daughter plays high level soccer, and everybody's like, oh, my child's going over here to FAMU, or my child's going to FSU, and I'm like, I'm going to be lucky if I'm not in a Baker Act unit. And you're not going to share that with anybody. And you're not going to share those things with people around a group of soccer moms. And nobody's going to bring you a casserole if your kids get Baker Acted, or if your child goes to jail for vaping in the school. You know, that's not going to happen. So where do we find that space for parents that are going to navigate big things? You know, because a lot of times parents don't talk about those things because they're fearful of being shamed, you know, because everybody's talking about all the amazing things that their kids are doing. You know, they're not talking about the fact that, you know, your kid might have gotten arrested for a DUI. You know, the only time we talk about it is when, unfortunately, we have an overdose death. And then we have parents that are rallying, you know, but we really need to, as parents, really start talking about these things as grandparents. You know, my grandson just got suspended at the beginning of the year, 8 days for smoking a THC vape, you know, and I do this work all day long. But you know, we know that substance use and mental health does not discriminate, and it's not defined by who we are, because if anything, we're overeducating them, but maybe we're not spending enough time, you know, and being able to have those conversations with my son to say, like, what are you guys doing as his parents? How can I help support? And what does this look like? Because prevention is it. And if we're not talking about recovery support services and healing across the continuum of care, we're doing a disservice. And I challenge everybody always, you know, whether you're working in family support, individual peer support, youth support, if you're putting people through your services at your organization, but you're not willing to employ them, then we're failing. We are failing our measures, and a lot of us are failing. You know, when I started looking at this, you know, there's 29 states across the US that are still asking for background screenings for peer work. You know, there's a lot of us, as I shared with you all, I did time in both Dade and Broward County, who've had to file exemptions if you're working in a state like Florida, right, where you have to have a level 2 clearance, which I understand that too, because I want my children to be safe wherever they are. But at the same time, are we putting in policies and procedures that are causing harm to individuals? Because I wasn't able to go to my daughter's school until second grade. And I was already 8 years in recovery because of my background screening. So now I'm looked at as a bad parent because I can't volunteer for anything because of the laws are saying I cannot be an active parent because of my felony offenses. And all of mine are primarily drug charges. There's no violent crimes. There's no crimes against children. I've rehabilitated my life. I have clemency. But these are things that we put in place. And not only that is we put them in place in HOAs. Because you commit a crime, you're not entitled to live in a safe neighborhood. These are the policies, and this is what Lynda was saying. Are we going back to mass incarceration and institutionalization? Do you know what your state policies say? Because yes, it's great that we're voting for the president and all of that and kumbaya. We're getting ready to come up on local election day. Do you know what's going on in your community? Or have you gotten so far up on the federal food chain that you've forgotten about your very own community in your own county that you live in and in your own state? Because I make it my business to know what's going on in my state, and it is not pretty. Most of the time when I go in and people say, "Oh, what state are you from?" I'm like, "Florida," and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you." And I'm like, don't feel sorry for me because I'm in it. I'm in it and I know what's going on and I'm an active member in advocacy because I have to be about it. My children and now my grandchildren really are our future and they're growing up in this community. And I'm going on grandbaby number 4 and it is not easy. And I really want to make sure that our communities are not just safe for me or for the people that I'm serving, but I want to make sure that my community is safe for my grandchildren. I want to make sure that my school understands, the school in my neighborhood understands that if my grandchild needs a little bit of extra support, that they know who to get them to. But what's happening through that process is a lot of people are going away because of the fear behind that. I'm asking you all, look at your programming. Don't fold up doors. We started, and the Federation started in advocacy in very small groups of people and parents that really wanted to start from a place before we had even money to do it. Because that advocacy is never going to stop. So we've got to think about, yes, we need money. We definitely do. I know I need to pay my bills too, and that's really super important. So how do we keep the money that we do have? And if not, how do we go after additional dollars that may be different from the money that we're used to getting? Can we pivot any of our narrative to really be inclusive and not hone into one black and white box? That we make it a little bit more gray, that we're trying to do things a little bit different because we've had to do things differently. And we're looking at what about the legislative budget requests that your state, is there any money left over in your county's budget that maybe you can ask for? Are you friends with the people? Do they know who you are? Do they know that your organization exists? Your county commission, your local representatives, and then your statewide representatives? Because if they don't know who you are, they're not going to know whether or not you need money. They're not even going to know whether or not your program is worthy of receiving the money. It is definitely, without a question in my mind, not about asking. It's about relationship building. I cannot express that enough. I am not a sales girl by any means. I definitely do not like cold calling. I don't like when I have to ask people for things. I like building relationships so that way when I do have to ask, I know that it's an easy ask. Because they know that I'm there to support their work as much as I want them to support my work. So when I get new people coming in, I say, what is it that you guys, what is your vision for this legislative session? And how can we help support you to accomplish that? We want to partner with you. We want to know when you're having your town hall so that way we can come in and see if what you're pushing for aligns with our mission and our vision. And that's really the thing that I'm really setting the tone for this year is what is the alignment of our organization, but also for me as a leader and me as a person in my community, and are my goals aligned with what I'm hoping to accomplish this year? My personal goals and my professional goals and our organizational goals, because I believe that there's more than one. Because if I personally do not align with my agency's mission, vision, and goals, I'm going to feel exhausted. I'm going to feel depleted. I am going to feel done. And I've been talking to people more and more in the world of peer support, and they are feeling tapped out. And I always tell people if you're feeling tapped out, is you are solving problems, you are not supporting solutions. Because we already know that the onus comes from the individual. There is nothing that anybody could have done for me to reclaim my life to step into this place that I'm in. Now, I did have a few mentors and I had some amazing mentors, but I had to track them down to get what I needed. I needed to track them down and say, hey, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. And I was telling people this at the age of 45 and 50. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. And they're like, when you grow up? And I'm like, yes, I am redefining myself. I am never too old to learn. And I want to continue to keep learning and growing. And some of the very people that I'm learning and growing from is our young people. And I always tell people this, if you are a leader of an organization, a person in leadership, if you don't have a mentee that is 35 and younger, you are going to fail the succession planning of our future, because we need to start preparing young people to understand, because if we do not understand history, history will repeat itself. And we have found ourselves in that situation now, and I'm seeing it. We are seeing the incarceration and institutionalization, unfortunately. We're seeing it with our unhoused bill. You know, you either go to civil citation, or you're either going to get into treatment or some kind of services, or you're going to jail. And that doesn't work. We know that that didn't work before. But we really need to figure out what that looks like. And we all have stake in this. This has to be a call to action. And I don't know, Lynda, how you're going to wrap up the conference. And I may be overstepping myself, but I really think that we need a call to action. Federation is one of the ones that I have been, the national organization that I have always held on to, because I have seen how Federation has grown. I have seen how Federation listens. I remember when I was like, oh, my kids are all going to age out. And then they expanded to families across the lifespan. I was like, yes. My son is going to be 30. He actually just turned 38 years old. And he still needs my support. And I need his support. And we need each other as a family. And I'm very, very fortunate to be able to have the support of the Federation and to see how much it continues to grow and how much it continues to bring. But if there's anything that I can leave you with is, let's have a conversation about what's next. Not about let's close down, we're fearful. Yes, we're all fearful, we have all of those things. But if we start shifting that narrative and start saying, we're coming back, we are going to take a stand, and we are going to reclaim and redefine what the restoration of families looks like, what families across the lifespan looks like, and how recovery can look for many of us. Because as we know, we also have aging parents that we have to include in that. And me and my husband are caring for my mother-in-law who has dementia, and my father-in-law is doing the best he can. But we have those situations that are going on. And who else better to do it than us as the Federation? And so I want to really open it up. And Lynda, I know that you wanted to have some conversation and dialogue, and I wanted to be able to save some time for that. But I wanted to say thank you all, to all of you all, for your love and your support. I've seen all the hearts going up, and thank you for indulging my emotion in the midst of this. But I love my children, and I'm so grateful that they still love me in the midst of all things, and we've been able to heal together. And Nikki, thanks for showing up on the screen and making me have another tearful moment. But Mom's really proud of you. You've come a long way. And maybe when you're willing and able, you'll share your story. All right, Lynda.
Oh my goodness. How do I follow up that in any way? Um, Susan, I've heard your story so many times, and I just want to keep listening. You are such an inspiration. I just look at you and I think, how can one woman be so powerful? Because you are. You are the face of resiliency. You are the face of determination. You're the face of faith. I mean, it's just, I am always so blessed when I hear you talk, or when it's just you and me talking. It's always a blessing. And we have several people who have things that they want to talk to you about. So let's see if we can get to a few of these questions while we have a moment. One question I did see, right now everyone's thanking you and just telling you how amazing it is. But one question I did see that I'm going to ask you if you will go back to, you mentioned a transportation plan. And we've got some folks in Detroit who would love to know more about that.
Sure, absolutely. We actually have a county-wide designation transportation plan where we have some of the EMS that we have brought to the table. This has been a collective group of commissioners, attorneys, school board members, because one of the struggles that we've seen is having youth, especially elementary school age, middle school, high school age, that are being transported in the back of a police car um, to a Baker Act unit, even when their parents haven't gotten there yet. So I think it took us probably about 15 to 18 months to come up with a good solid plan, and we're still walking through the hiccups. We have a tremendous champion, our former commissioner Lois Wexler, who retired but is still a huge advocate, and she was a school board member who has made it her mission to make sure that children are transported in a humane and dignified, cared for way when they're going to a receiving facility. So we do have one, and I can definitely share if you are interested. Just drop an email either to Lynda or to myself, and I'll definitely share some of the process behind it and actually what it looks like. It's pretty comprehensive.
Now, Susan, you said like it was no big deal. We just got these people together, but we know that's hard to do. Can you give us some tips for how you get people together?
You need a champion, and you need a champion who knows the no, right? And it happened to be, as I mentioned, former Commissioner Lois Wexler. She was part of the school board. Now we have Senator Osgood, who is also part of the school board. And so these are people that really bring in people, right? Because it started initially with parents and one funder, and then we weren't getting any traction. So you need a little bit of muscle. So it really is kind of a big deal, and it was a lot of deal and a lot of drawing. But we had biweekly or semi-monthly meetings, and then it just now became a plan, and now it's a House bill. Somebody wrote it in legislation. So we have a House bill pertaining to the children that I can be more than happy to share. Obviously, it's Sunshine, House Bill 945, and it includes a transportation plan in it. And the hope is that other counties are also doing the same.
For for people who are new to this work, how would you recommend they go about getting to know these very important people?
So I think the most important way to get to know them, because I knew of them for a really long time, but I didn't know them.
Yeah.
And 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 it's scary to know them. At least for me it was really scary because I'm not that, like when you tell me, oh, Susan, you're just like this powerful person. I'm like, me? Like, because I'm a behind the scenes kind of girl. But I've had to learn that it's okay to ask and say, hey, I'd like to have a 10-minute meeting with you. I'm a constituent in Broward County or whatever county that you're in. And I'd like to get an opportunity to know what you're working on this year and get to know about them, not about me or tell them anything about my organization, but I want to get to know you. And when I started doing that, I was amazed at how they were like, "Hey, I haven't seen you in a while." And I'm like, "Oh, you even know who I am?" And I think that that's the most important thing is remember that they're human beings. And they at one point started very similar to many of us. They didn't start just being an elected official or, they got into this work because they too have a passion for it. Get to know the human side of them. And that's the best bit of advice that I can give because I was surprised at how human they were. I thought they were not human, honestly. I was afraid of them for a long time. Yeah. Sometimes I still am, depending upon who they are, but for the most part, I think I built a lot of equity in building relationships because I don't ask them for anything. I just really want to know them. And I always say, "What are you doing for your self care in the midst of all of this?" And they really appreciate the fact that I care about them as a human being. So I share a little bit of love and compassion because their work is not easy.
Wow. Those are just huge strategies that you just came up with, Susan. Taking time just to get to know these folks. Yes, we probably all need to do more of that. So I have a question about your journey. The question is, when your children come to you with trauma they've experienced because of your trauma, how do you work through it? Do you find yourself getting defensive when this first happens? How do you do it calmly?
So when it initially happened to me, I think I had just been home from treatment, maybe 3 months, and my son was 13 at the time, and now he's going to be 31, and he was tearing up the room, tearing everything up because he couldn't understand how I brought home this new baby and I was doing all these things for this new baby and he wasn't loved and cared for. And so he was angry. And my first instinct was, I am going to beat the pants off of this kid and I'm going to show him that I'm the mom and he's taking advantage of me. And when I walked in that room, I cried. And I cried with him and I hugged him and I told him how sorry I was and that I loved him and that I couldn't take anything back. All I can do is be a better mom today. And I let him cry and I let him tell me what he was hurting and what he was going through. Um, and I just listened because he was right. He was hurting. It was his perspective of everything. And even recently, he told his story on our podcast, Talking Wellness. And my husband goes, "That is not how it was. He made up all these things." I said, "That's how it was for him. That's his perspective of everything that took place." He goes, "Yeah, but don't you feel some kind of way?" I said, "No, I don't." Because I've learned to let them have their space because that's where they are at. And I can only love them in a different way, right? And I can only show them that I'm going to be there for them. But I don't get held hostage anymore. Because for a long time I was parenting by guilt and I was held hostage and I felt a certain kind of way. That part has gotten better. And I tell them, let's talk about that. Or sometimes I have to say, you know what? I can't have this conversation with you right now, especially with one of my sons because he loves to come at me. And it's really hard for me. And I said, I'm not going to do this with you right now. You always seem to come to me during this time. Can I tell you what would be helpful for me? And maybe we can meet in the middle. It has helped him, and he has grown tremendously over the last 2 years. But he's still a work in progress because I think he's hurting the most. I didn't share in my story, but I was looking for love in multiple places. And so my first two children have one father. My third child has another father. My fourth child has another father. And my fifth child has another father. And so we have all of this dynamic that goes on, and these are some of their hurts and their pains. Now, it doesn't mean that I feel all of these terrible ways about myself. I did the best that I could and I had maladaptive coping mechanisms, but I hold space with them and I love them through their growth opportunities the same way they loved me through my growth opportunities. And it doesn't mean that we don't have tough conversations. And it doesn't mean that sometimes I say, I'm done, because I am human. But for the most part, I simply just say, we're going to pause and come back.
I'm just going to give you an aside right here, Susan. I do these national events all the time. I have never seen as many reactions as we're getting to what you're saying. Just please know that as we're
Thank
talking.
you. Thank
One
you.
of the questions, you mentioned your mission and having to pivot, and we truly understand that because we too are doing the same thing. Um, because we want to be here for the future. And sometimes that causes us to need to pivot a bit. But the question here is, how do we get our boards to make our mission flexible? If we're having to do this, how do we explain that to our boards?
Yeah. The fortunate thing is my board is people in recovery and families in recovery. And so they kind of know, and I have been very transparent with my board from the jump. When there's good things happening, I tell them. When there's challenging things happening, I tell them. When there's indifferent things happening, I tell them. I invite them into the fold of things. Many of our board members also attend many of our events. But my suggestion is really to even listen to what they have to say. A lot of times people, and I mean this respectfully, but a lot of times people withhold things from their board because they're fearful of whatever reason. I typically don't. We have nepotism policies because I employ my children, I employ Rachel's children, I employ this person's children. So we have protective factors in place for our organization, but I always invite them into the fold of that. And my board has been supportive in that. But I also think that it's important to have also board members that understand nonprofit work and that may be involved in a part of the system somewhere. So that way they have an understanding, because I do have board members that are also in corporate America that don't understand this part. So this part is a little hard for them. So I think that having board retreats and also inviting the board into the meet and greets with the staff so that way they understand, and also into some of the community meetings is important. But I think having a transparent organization is key.
I do like that. And I share your belief about that. I am probably transparent to the point that my board gets tired of me, but we're all in it together. And if they don't know what's going on, good and bad, successes and failures, then they can't help.
Sure.
Rachel, I'm going to ask you a question, darling. Would you send those nepotism policies to me and I'll get those out to everybody? Because I'm sure there are other people who do employ family members as peer, whatever. And let's get those out so everyone will have them, especially if people have thought about doing that and they haven't done it.
Yeah.
Another question about your journey. What kind of therapy do you recommend that people seek for trauma? Regular counseling does not seem to work. Are there any particular therapies that you find helpful?
So for me, because I did mine a little while ago, I did trauma incident reduction. I know that doesn't work for everybody because repetition is hard. I also am an EMDR practitioner, and I think that EMDR works very, very well for many, many people. I also am an EFT practitioner, which is the emotional freedom techniques with tapping, and so sometimes self-soothing. A lot of the mindfulness is really, really super helpful for individuals. I've done mindfulness, DBT, EMDR, and TIR. And sometimes what I've found is people think that trauma work is one and done. It's not. I hate to tell you, it's not. You do your first deep dive and it's really hard and it's really challenging. But what happens is, and I have found, because I have layers upon layers from a whole life span of it. And I have lots of very violent histories that my subconscious mind has blocked out certain things. And I find that in certain situations, it may come up and I get a trauma response and I have to have tools to counteract and to help me until I can get the additional support that I may need with that. So I always highly encourage people to understand that our work is not ever fully done until we know that our subconscious mind has unleashed everything. And it doesn't always. I've done narrative therapy too because there are certain parts of my story that I don't recall. And so I've had to recreate in order to fit into this world where everybody goes, let's play the name game. Well, I have no idea where the origin of my name came from, and all of these things. And so we don't think of those things. So in order not to say that to people, I've created a narrative that keeps me safe without oodling layers of trauma on people. So I've learned to do these things through my self-care. So I encourage people just to not make it a one and done. If you need a bit of additional support, go get it. Find what works for you and do more of it.
And a follow-up to that, someone has asked, can you explain EMDR? Not everyone is familiar with that.
Yeah. So let me see if I can explain it in a simple way because you can use light therapy with EMDR. You can do the container in the box, which a lot of people like to do that. It's also the eye movement. You might have heard it where you're using the eye movement and the rapid movement within the eyes. It just depends on your therapist that you're working with or the practitioner, right? Because you don't have to have a license to do EMDR. It's really about meeting people. And it's not reliving the trauma experience over and over. And it's not like saying, okay, Lynda, we're going to look at your whole history of trauma and we're going to take you back through and clear it all up. No, it's really what is presenting itself and how do we deal with what's presenting itself without having to have you relive it over and over and over again. It's really taking it and putting it over here and still being able to live through your life. And that's what I think people were starting to say, like, why do I have to relive my trauma over and over in order to get through it? And that doesn't work for everybody. And the most important thing is we want to do things that really help people, not hinder them and say, well, this is what worked for me, so you got to do it. And that's what I love with this whole what works for you? What makes you feel good? And we're going to try this. And if it doesn't work, and I did this with a person that had extensive gang history. And it was really pretty amazing to see that if you stick to what you're supposed to be doing, it helps them to have closure and live in their life and not have to relive that years and years of trauma and violence.
Thank you so much. People would definitely wanted to know more about that.
Yeah.
And I've not done that personally, but I have heard really good things about it. I will say when EMDR first became popular, I was skeptical because it seemed so different.
Me too. And believe it or not, that's why I became a practitioner because I went through the hard way, which is trauma incident reduction, where you have to keep reliving it and then you go work on something else and keep reliving it. And I was like, this the only way is through, and it's like, okay, hold on. It doesn't work for everybody that way, So I was very skeptical too. So I became a practitioner because of that.
Yes, yes. All right, we are quickly running out of time here. So Susan, I'm going to ask you to just reflect on everything you've talked about here and give us your summation. What's your message of hope for this group?
Man, I think when I think about it, and because there are so many different people probably on the line. So to the families, I want to say love louder, love harder, and don't give up. To the youth, You're not broken. My daughter reminds me that all the time. Why do people think that we're broken? You're not broken. You're becoming your ultimate version of you, and just keep persevering. And to all of the providers, we're not our diagnosis. We're not the problem. We're people just like you who just need a little bit more care. And maybe care may look a little bit different. But to all of you as a collective body, I just really want to say it's not over. It is just beginning, and we're able to recreate itself. Just like I was sharing with you what it felt like and how my life felt like it needed to end. And even when I got incarcerated and they told me that I was going to deliver my baby in shackles and would never see the other ones again, and I wanted to lay down and die and wanted to give up. Please don't give up. I know right now the political climate seems heavy and daunting, but we have an opportunity to come together and create a collective impact that can transform and change history if we shift and pivot in a positive way. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Susan, for sharing your journey and then sharing your successes. That sometimes I think we don't get the whole picture. And
I didn't share, and I don't like to share in this because, and maybe it's my humble being, but we are a multi-million-dollar agency, guys. Our budget is over $7 million, and that is over that of more than sometimes a national organization doing different kind of work. And I'm telling you, it didn't just happen overnight, but they trust us with this money, and we have people that want to give us more money because we're suiting up and we're doing the work. And that can be your reality too. Don't give up until the miracle happens. I would have never thought that I would be here.
I would have never thought you wouldn't. All right, folks, thank you so much for being with us. I hope you are leaving this session feeling as humble and as inspired as I do.